Okay, this is 7.4 part 2, and I'm starting on the page where it says find the reference angle of negative 11 pi over 6. Alright, just like we did the other ones, I'm going to go ahead and change this into degrees just so it's a little bit easier to figure out. So I take the pi's, cancel them out. 6 goes into 18 3 times, and you get 30 there. Now if you take 11 times 30, whoops. Going on here. So I'm working on that right now. 11 times 30. If you multiply that together, you get 330. And remember, this is negative, so we have negative 330. All right, negative 330 is very close to 360, so let's take 360 and subtract 330 from it, and you get 30 degrees. So the reference angle of negative 11 pi over 6 is 30 degrees, or we can say pi over 6 since they started in radians. Let's write them up as radians as well. Objective 5, using a reference angle to find the exact value of trig functions. Now we need to figure out if the reference angle is positive or negative. That's going to be really important because wherever you start, that's the one you look at, and then you figure out if your function is positive or negative. So just as a little reminder, all students take calc. I'm going to put that over here before I start this example. And remember that all students take calc. In quadrant 1, everybody's positive. In quadrant 2, sine's positive. In quadrant 3, tangent's positive. And then in quadrant 4, cosine is positive. Okay, so let's use the reference angle to find this. Sine of 150. 1, find the reference angle. Okay, so I'm in quadrant 2. Remember, I told you to figure out where you're at. Here's 180 degrees. Here's 90. Here's where I am at 150. So I'm going to take 180 less 150, and I get 30 degrees. Okay, 2. Find the value. So sine at 30 degrees, that's what we're looking for. And sine at 30 degrees, once again, you can use your triangle. And sine at 30 degrees is opposite over hypotenuse, so that equals 1/2. And I'm in quadrant 2. Okay, so is sine positive or negative in quadrant 2? It is positive because it's in quadrant 2, so therefore my answer is positive 1/2. Objective 6, find the exact value of trig functions of an acute given information about the functions. Okay, once again, when you do this next example, you're going to have to draw a triangle and then use SOHCAHTOA to figure the rest out. Okay, so here's the example. Find, or given that cosine theta equals negative 2 over 3, and theta is a value between pi over 2 and pi, find the exact value of each of the remaining trig functions. Okay, so here's 0, here's pi over 2, here's pi, and here's 3 pi over 2, and then back up to 2 pi. So I got to figure out which quadrant I'm in. Theta is in between pi over 2 and pi. So I'm in quadrant 2. Now I can use all students take calc. Remember, only sine and its reciprocal function cosecant are positive in quadrant 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw out the triangle and go from there. So remember, I told you that the base of the triangle is on the x-axis, and I have negative 2 over 3. So here's 3, and here is negative 2. Let's put it there. And here's my point. So there's my triangle. Okay, so I'm going to move it like that. Here's my angle. Remember, this is negative 2. The height is 3. I got to find r. Okay, normally I told you that length can never be negative, but in this case I'm letting it stay negative just so I can keep track of my signs, and I mean SIG and S, of all the trig functions. So use Pythagorean Theorem. 3 squared plus negative 2 squared equals the radius squared. So we get 9 plus 4 equals r squared. This is 13. So r equals the square root of 13. Okay, now I have to find all 6 trig functions. Cosine is already given to us, and cosine is negative 2 over 3. So its reciprocal function secant is negative 3 over 2. Sine. Sine, once again, is defined as opposite over the hypotenuse. So you get 3 over radical 13, and we expect this to be positive. The reason why is we're in quadrant 2. So if I rationalize this, I get 3 radical 13 over 13. Okay, its reciprocal function is cosecant, and if I flip this over, I get radical 13 over 3. And then tangent. Tangent is opposite over adjacent, so that's going to be 3 over negative 2. And its reciprocal function is cotangent, which is negative 2/3. So I just found all 6 trig functions based on the given fact and based on the stipulation. So when you do these, it is important to know what quadrant you're in and which functions are positive and negative therein. Okay, and that's the end. So once again, just be careful of your reference angles. Remember, for a reference angle, it has to be acute, and you have to use the x-axis. And what I mean by that is if you're in quadrant 1, you're fine. In quadrant 2, it's 180 minus the angle, because 180 is the x-axis there. In quadrant 3, it's sorry about that. It is the angle minus 180. And then in quadrant 4, because we're close to the x-axis, is 360 minus the angle. Okay, so that's just a quick review for the reference angles. And the other thing we learned in here was which functions are positive and negative where. So there was a mnemonic device. All students take calculus. So that's a mnemonic device. The A stands for all functions. The S stands for sine and its reciprocal function cosecant. The T stands for tangent or cotangent, its reciprocal function. And the C stands for cosine and then secant. So this chart tells you which angles are positive where. So for instance, once again, if I'm in quadrant 2, I know quadrant 2 sine is positive. But if I'm looking for cosine in quadrant 2, cosine is going to be negative, as is tangent. Okay, so hopefully that helped you. That's the end of 7.4. There will be 2 more videos you need to watch for 7.5.